Podcasting between Leeds and London, Interesting Podcast is your indispensable guide to the more interesting things in life. Your hosts are about to take you on a journey through all that they find interesting, curious, helpful, and downright bizarre. And now, here are your hosts, Matt and Rick.
And hello, welcome back. This is episode 6 now of Interesting Podcast, and a very interesting summer we've had too. Lots and lots to talk about today. So Matt, Interesting Podcast, we're going viral, aren't we?
We are going viral. We now have a YouTube channel up and running, which has been getting hundreds of views. So people can check that out. It's youtube.com/interestingpod. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Interesting Podcast, so YouTube and Twitter are both at the relatives /interestingpod. You can actually listen to all of the podcasts on there. But yeah, we've been having lots and lots of views. You can also check out our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/interestingpodcast, where people have been adding comments and sharing. So please get involved. We want you to be involved. Share us, love us, share us with your friends and family, pass us around. We're not jealous like that. So please.
I'd like to make a particular thank you to the YouTube user Hit Me Quick, who has listened to our Olympic special podcast, taking note at where we said that, you know, that all of the problems that were expected weren't realised, and he has helpfully commented that only wankers like us were negative. So thank you very much, Hit Me Quick, for that insightful review of our episode number 5, our Olympics podcast. More than welcome to listen to the rest and tell us what you think.
That's true. I don't think we were particularly negative. We're just saying we anticipated problems, but I thought overall it was actually quite a positive. We were saying how good the Olympics were. Oh, well.
Then he is called Hit Me Quick.
Could you imagine that? Somebody on the internet posting something without fully researching it and they may be wrong. Heaven forbid.
Absolutely. I don't think they quite realise the journalistic excellence underpinning Interesting Podcast. We have teams of researchers, literally teams of researchers in the background to feed us with the information that we talk about.
Yeah, we have a quick chat and we go on Google. Okay, so but I've actually been online this week, and something I think I'm a bit behind the curve on this. A video I've been watching a lot whilst I was doing a YouTube channel for Interesting Podcast. I actually came across it originally because I know somebody that I'm name dropping here. I know a girl called Rita Ora, who's very famous at the moment.
Sorry, Matt, you've dropped something there.
Oh, it was a name, wasn't it? Yeah. Hopefully, we're going to get her on a future podcast. I'm going to ask her. I'm going to ask her, see if she'll come on it, which will be quite interesting.
In the same way that most women do.
it'll be a straight rejection. No, hopefully
she'll have one of her team reject you.
Yeah, shut up. Well, hopefully, no, genuinely, we might be able to get her on in the forthcoming episodes. She's a bit busy at the moment, but she did a cover of a song called "Someone Who I Used to Know." She did it for Radio 1 Live Lounge. And I'd never heard the original, so I actually typed in the original into YouTube, and it's by Gotye, I believe is the guy's pronounced. Gotye and a woman, I've forgotten her name actually, but...
It's actually somebody that I used to know, and I don't know where you were, Matt. This was big news. It was number 1 for weeks. You'd go into bars and they would take down the uplifting boom, 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 and they'd say, "There's somebody that I used to know." It's just drivel.
See, it's a girl called Kimbra, I believe it's pronounced, who sort of does it with her. I find it actually quite an interesting song. I've been watching the video a lot as well, you know, basically standing on a wall getting painted. The parodies of it have been brilliant. The Star Wars that I used to know, if you haven't seen that, really worth watching. With Darth Vader and George Lucas about the Star Wars that I used to know and how it's been ruined. That's actually really good. But I actually find it sort of like quite a messed up old weird police song or something of that kind of genre. I know that you're not a fan of it, and you have a very different musical taste at the moment. So tell the listeners. Now, this is meant to be quite a highbrow, interesting.
No, hang on. Hang on, Matt. I'm going to have to stop you there. Before you set this up to be something that it's not, I reminded you that that kind of somebody that I used to know being at number 1 for weeks and weeks. and just asked you if you were aware of what was at number 1 at the moment.
The
And this
reason
week,
is
I
because
believe...
because I thought Rita Ora's at number 1, then I thought, no, wait a minute, it's not
Much better,
Ora,
much better.
Shut up, it's Amelia...
No, not Emily Sandé, no.
Yeah, I thought it was Amelia Sandé, but no, you corrected me.
No.
So who's at...
Sam and the Womp, Bom Bom is at number 1. This is a party tune. Now before you start insulting the musical tastes of the nation, and this is number 1. This is the most hotly bought single in the country right now. People are voting with their feet in their wallets, but it is one of those cheesy Euro trash kind of shit pop tunes that reminds me of being on all-inclusive holidays or, in a bar in Spain somewhere. It's truly awful, but it is quite funny.
It's terrible. I'd never heard of this song. So I don't really listen to radio, and I don't have a TV, so I don't really know what's going on music-wise, actually. I kind of sit in the dark. I sit in the dark, and every year I hear a new song. No, I'd never heard of Sam and the Womp. I don't know what a Womp is, and I don't care who Sam is, but it's just awful. Awful, 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 awful.
So we were talking about parodies as well, Matt, and I don't know if you get a minute afterwards, you have to see the Call Me Batman, the Call Me Maybe. There's a Call Me Batman.
Is there?
Call Me Batman. Actually quite funny. Make sure
you know the girl who sings that, Carly Rae Jepsen.
Yeah.
Did you know she's like 26?
Right.
She looks about 18.
Right.
That's my only point. There's no. It doesn't go any further in depth than that, apart from the fact that she only looks about 18, but she is 26.
Fair enough. I mean, I obviously, when I'm using the internet, I'm researching more highbrow, kind of intellectually robust things than Carly Rae Jepsen, so I wouldn't know that, to be honest.
Well, I'll tell you one thing which I have been researching this week, because I think is absolutely hilarious, is our dear monarch, who has been representing us in Las Vegas. I am talking, of course, of Prince Harry.
Oh, Prince Harry. Do you know what? You can't help feeling sorry for Prince Harry. You get into trouble when you do wear a Nazi uniform.
I know.
You get into trouble when you don't wear a Nazi form. I mean,
but if your only two styles of dress is either as
Nazi
an
or
SS
naked.
officer or naked, that's going to cause problems, isn't it? It doesn't matter if you're Prince Harry or just a common man on the street. If they're your two methods of dress, either as a Nazi officer or naked, that's going to get you into trouble.
Matt, me and you, let's write an unofficial biography of Harry from Nazi to naked.
From Nazi to naked. Do you know what? People have been having a go at him. If people don't know about this, in the Sun newspaper this week, Prince Harry's been in Las Vegas, and he had some, well, it's fair to say he had fun, and they took some pictures of him. Let's face it, he's in Vegas, he's having fun. I've been to Vegas. If I was Prince Harry, I would be up to much more than what he's up to.
Do you know what offends me more? It's not that he was naked, it's that he was in Vegas playing billiards. What? You're in Vegas! Why are you playing naked? I don't care that he's naked, but billiards! Billiards in Vegas!
Billiards, that's snooker or pool, isn't it?
It's a 3-ball bloody off the side thing. It's what makes me play instead of pool, Matt.
See, because a lot of people criticise the Sun, and I think, I think again it's more to do with invasion of privacy. I understand he's a monarch, but he's also a 20-something-year-old guy in Vegas. He may have abused his position a little bit to be with all these lap dancers or strippers, whichever girls they were. I think he should sort of really reassess the people who he keeps around him, because obviously this was like a closed environment and people have taken pictures, and I think that's the kind of the time that we live in now. I don't think people are doing anything necessarily worse than years before, but now everybody's equipped with a camera on their phone.
Well, I also understand that there are some fears at the palace that there are going to be some snaps that maybe come out later of some shenanigans that occurred on Richard Branson's island as well.
I've seen a couple of those. I've seen a couple of those already. They were in the Sun, and I think the thing is, literally, right. This is how it works. If you're in Vegas, if you're with Prince Harry, and if you can literally take a picture of Prince Harry or anybody doing anything wrong, And within a minute, you can have that online going to thousands of people. That's the reality of the situation.
Or sell them to the press. I mean, I think when it comes to the press, the royal family is essentially majority funded by the taxpayer, and they are there to act in a certain, with certain decorum and respect. And I think whilst Harry has lived a life of immense privilege, there are some responsibilities that come with that, namely not acting like a dick. And I think that there is a big argument here between what is in the public interest and what is of interest to the public, and those two things are slightly different. Yeah. But if he's going to get his kit off and he's going to do it in a place where there are cameras there, I think, and I absolutely, and I don't like the Sun generally, but I stand by their decision to publish those photos, saying that it would be morally perverse not to, and I think so. I think that's right.
I have a different view of that. You say that, it's kind of morally perverse not to. I think that, yes, he is our monarch, then therefore our media should not do things which are going to damage the integrity of that. And by not print, I think that the Sun shouldn't have printed them. I don't want to see him naked. I don't think that, they also have like a...
Before they were published in the Sun, answer this question. Had you seen those pictures?
No.
Have you seen those pictures?
I have seen them now.
Did you see them in the Sun?
Yes.
Saw them in the Sun, you hadn't seen them online before?
I hadn't... No, I saw them on the Sun online.
Fine. Well, I think most people that have access to the internet, as soon as that story came out, they'd have been straight onto Google, they'll have seen the pictures. Yeah, I did. I saw them before they were printed in the Sun. And I think part of this is the palace were threatening legal action against anybody that published them. Yes, and to be honest, the media in this country should not be threatened by the press department of the palace in that way. And I'm so glad they did publish them, because that they were there, the world had access to them, and whether or not they were published was almost irrelevant. It was a byproduct.
But also the fact that they were published by the Sun, that's what caused a lot of the media storm. And also, I think it's not the fact that it's Prince Harry, it's the fact that I think that it's anybody. I don't think anybody should be... The thing is, it was a private party. He wasn't out in public doing it. It was a private thing he was at. And you know what I mean? If he was out doing something stupid out in public and he was causing an offence to people, he wasn't. He was doing something in the privacy of like hotel rooms or in the privacy of this... It was a cordoned off area, and it was a trusted friend who took the pictures, apparently.
Well, do we know that? Because I thought there were some random guests there. I thought there were some people that were just invited up.
No, well, from what I've read, and I may be wrong on this, it was one of his friends who took the pictures and sold them, and the girls are now selling their story. Which I just think that it was in private. If it was out in public, if it was causing offence to people in public, then fair play. But there was something that happened in private, and I think that things that happen in private, whether they be in the royal family or whether they be anybody else, whether they be a celebrity, whatever it might be, I think that those things should still be respected, and people can't just print naked pictures of people.
Well, I think there would be one point that we would at least agree on, and I can't stand it at the moment, the fact that the Royal Protection Officers seem to be getting a bit of a hard time for allowing him to behave like this. And it's like, hang on a second, the Royal Protection Team. Yeah. Well, the Royal Protection Team are part of Scotland Yard, and they have two jobs. One is to stop him or to prevent him being killed, and two is to prevent him being kidnapped. His own behaviour is not there to be regulated by a tax-funded division of Royal Scotland Yard that's there to ensure his personal safety. Absolutely. They're there to ensure his safety, not to stop him being a dick.
Yeah, no, I understand. I don't think, and the thing is, you say I don't think he's been a dick. I think that... all right.
No, I say that in a way like we're all dicks. I mean, I have nothing against Harry, and I think it's hilarious. And if I was a prince, it's the kind of thing I would do. But I just think it's one of those things. It's happened, and I think he just needs to take a bit of responsibility for it. That's all.
Okay.
I'd love to go for a pint with him anyway.
I would. Talk about going out and shenanigans and stuff. I went to... With my work, actually, I'm not going to get into what my sort of work and stuff is, but I actually went to a singles night last night for the first time I ever have been, because I actually took some clients and stuff, and It was quite an interesting experience. I know that you've been in a relationship for many a years now, so many a year even. So you've probably never been to a singles night. I tell you what,
never been speed dating, never been to a singles night.
See, I've done a lot of speed dating in my past because one of my friends in Manchester used to run a speed dating company, so I used to go along regularly, which was
I think the speed would probably make me talk too much.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's I tell you what though, those 3 minutes can either go by very fast or very slowly. It's quite. But yesterday I went to the thing. I'm not going to mention the company, but it's a big company in London, and every month or something they have like a free party, just in a bar in Marble Arch, or I think it's in a few places. And basically you just kind of turn up, and if you want to be involved in it, you get like a coloured straw from behind the bar. So you can be in that bar and just think, it's a strange atmosphere in here. There's a lot
of nervous, ugly people.
There's a lot of strange guys walking around, and I enjoyed it.
Was everybody holding their drink really close to their chest?
I tell you what, there were quite a few drunken first kisses going on.
Do I put the tongue in? Don't I put the tongue in? Tongue to not to tongue.
It was. I saw quite a few people leaving together with people. It was quite interesting. I only stay. The thing is, also to catch up on our last episode, I'm still not drinking. It's been the best part of a month now actually, and so I'm not drinking still. So I didn't get fully involved, and also I was working. I left about 11 anyway. But by the time I was leaving, the light, because it'd been on since 5. I don't know I didn't get there till 9, right? So I don't know who went at 5.
So basically, it was people that had been there for 4 hours that were still left.
No. No. There was people still arriving. There were hundreds of people. Hundreds of people. And I think the majority of the people were involved with the singles night to some capacity. I'm sure that there were some people who weren't, but most of the people seemed to be on it. And no, it was quite entertaining actually. Quite entertaining. It was quite good fun. So if people are looking, I still don't think single nights are the best way to meet people, but that's just my philosophy. But no, there's lots going on this weekend. You know what? I'm just looking out the window now. It's starting to rain. I was going to go to the Notting Hill Carnival, but if it's raining, I don't think I can bother, to be honest. Because the thing is with Notting Hill Carnival, I know there's one in Leeds as well, which isn't as good, because it's up north, and of which it would be really cold. Because Notting Hill Carnival, it's there's no cover, everything's open air, and so if it's raining, you're going to get wet, and people start to get quite pushy. And I went last year, and it
stabby.
A bit stabby. It was quite an experience, I'll tell you that. And if it's going to be raining, I'm not massively convinced about going. But there's one up in Leeds. I didn't know there was one in Leeds. What's the one in Leeds like?
No, it's interesting because I've never been to the Notting Hill Carnival, but I have been to the one in Leeds, which is it's the Leeds West Indian Carnival. And I imagine it's the same thing. It starts off in a park where there's loads of places you can buy a lot of jerk chicken for sale, or rice and peas and things like that, and then kind of a really colourful parade with dancers and floats and all of that through the city centre and back out. But what I didn't realise is that the Leeds Carnival is actually the oldest West Indian carnival in Europe. It's been going since 1967, which makes it kind of, a really old carnival. And whilst it will be nothing like on the scale of London, I kind of imagine, and maybe I've got this wrong, but I imagine it's kind of a bit more how carnivals it's a bit more true to its roots, because I imagine the Notting Hill Carnival attracts all kinds of people, just absolutely anybody and everybody. And I can imagine how busy that gets. Although I think for research purposes, we probably need to go to Rio and go and see a carnival there before we start talking about carnivals here, because I imagine those carnivals piss all over what we've got.
And it'll be raining.
And a little bit of sun as well.
From carnivals to festivals. See what I did there, Rick?
Good link.
Seamless.
We should go professional, Matt.
Wait a minute, my phoning. Hello, BBC. That sounds like I work at the BBC. I'll do that again. Hello? Oh, the BBC? No, I'm busy. I can't take my own radio. I know he's leaving the breakfast show, but no, I do interesting podcast. I cannot replace Chris Moyles, who got burgled last week.
Yes, so I hear.
And,
I shouldn't laugh. So I hear.
Chris Moyles, if he's listening, which I very much doubt he is, actually goes to the same pub as me, which is the Highgate, which is the Woodman in Highgate.
He also goes, because he's obviously from Leeds, to Mojo's, the cocktail bar that I know and love. When you come over to Leeds for a planning session, we'll go.
Yeah. So
from Carnival to Festival, your seamless link.
So, seamless link. I think you mentioned it at some point that you went to the Edinburgh Festival.
Edinburgh Fringe Festival, absolutely. Do you know anything about the Fringe Festival?
Do you know what? The other day I was on the bus, and there was a brochure for the Edinburgh Festival. Now, I've heard of the Edinburgh Festival an awful lot. Yeah, there we go. He's showing it to me on the webcam. Obviously, because it's a radio and podcast, Rick showing things on the webcam is obviously not that useful to the people because we know it's voice. Now, this is going back years and years, but I don't want to get into this, but I used to do stand-up comedy a long time ago, like 10, 15 years ago, and I got through to a final of a competition of something, I think it was So You Think You're Funny, I believe it was called, and the final was going to be held in Edinburgh, but I actually did my back in playing football. I sprained a muscle in my spine, so I had to miss it. So I couldn't go, which was, as you can imagine, quite annoying. So
the real funny thing about this Fringe guide that you said you saw on the bus is I actually picked this up about 400 yards from where you work in London, because I got that from the Comedy Store.
Yeah.
And I got 2 copies, and I had a look at it beforehand. But basically, the Fringe Festival, there used to be, and it's a really old festival. There's a festival in Edinburgh called the Edinburgh International Festival, and now it's kind of it's more highbrow. It's a lot of opera, a lot of orchestras, and a lot of international kind of more like classical music that tour Edinburgh. And many years ago, and I think it was in the 40s that the Fringe Festival started. Just some venues outside started showing plays, and it's grown and it's grown and it's grown. And now what you get is in the Old Town in Edinburgh, and within kind of about a half a mile radius, literally every available space is turned into a performing space. So you've got performing spaces in theatres, but in bars, in hotels, in cellars, for example, one we went to was called The Vault, and it literally is one room in a cellar with about 15 chairs in front of it. And you've got I think I remember reading that this year, in the 3 weeks of the Edinburgh Festival, there will be 1.8 million performances within that 1 square mile, because everything's a venue. Most shows last an hour, maybe some a little bit more, and the turnover is really high, so that each venue is showing kind of, in each auditorium they've got about 10, 15 shows a day.
It's, I actually, when I picked up that brochure, I thought the Edinburgh Festival was of decent size. I literally had no idea how big it was. Now, I actually when I actually looked at the brochure, my God, it's like, it's
insane.
It's like the Argos catalogue.
Theatre. Absolutely. So I was there for 6 days, just 6 days, and in that time I saw 26 shows. And it's reasonably kind of hard going. You have to be up, you have to be organised, you have to be planned, you have to get your tickets, you have to get to the venues. And I'm not going to go through everything I saw, but just to give you kind of an idea of the variety, I saw all kinds of stuff in those 27. So I'm really into theatre and always have been, like proper theatre.
Well, let me ask you, how long were you there for?
6 days.
How long's the whole thing on for in total, do you know?
I think it's 3 weeks.
Oh, 3 weeks. So you were there for 6 days, and how many shows did you get to see?
Just said 26.
Oh, so you saw 26.
Yeah, 26 shows.
Rick, tell me, what were your highlights? What were your festival highlights? What are the shows that you saw and rated?
think absolutely number one, by far and away the best thing I saw, simply because it was such a surprise, was something called the Agony and Ecstasy of Steve Jobs. This was performed by an actor called Grant O'Rourke, and it was a one-man show. It was a dialogue, and it started off with him playing like this techno geek, talking about Apple I and Apple II, and the evolution of the Apple products and how he had to be at the front of the line, and some little interesting anecdotes about how Steve Jobs, enlisted Steve Wozniak to do some programming, saying if he could do it, quickly, he'd get paid $1,000, and then we find out in later life that Steve Jobs actually got paid $5,000 for that.
Really? Okay.
And it was a whole monologue that kind of moved on to Foxconn. And I think the guy that wrote it visited Foxconn, and it was talking about kind of how Apple products are made. And what people don't realize is that an iPhone is essentially 100% handmade. You kind of imagine like machines and gadgets like in a car factory, but he explains in quite some detail how the people at Foxconn make these phones. And then it gets really heavy. Like there's the stuff they use to clean the screens with is called hexane. And hexane evaporates 10% faster than alcohol, which is why they use it. But it's also a really potent neurotoxin. So the people that clean the screens can work for about a year, and then they essentially develop a neurotoxin that makes them shake violently, so they can't work anymore. And they go through their labour like they're, disposable. And it was quite hard hitting in terms of some of the ethics behind Apple, whilst at the same time being really funny. So that was a real big hit. And there were a couple of one-man shows or one-woman shows that I saw. I will mention another one very quickly called Deidre and Me. Now, I have a bit of an interest in this because when I was a lot younger, I used to do a bit of acting. I used to be in some plays, and I was in a show once called Our Day Out in Harrogate. And I was in it with a girl called Rachel Halliwell. And she now tours this one-woman show called Deirdre and Me. Hilarious. It's about a super stalker who absolutely loves Deirdre Barlow from Coronation.
I was going to say, I think I've heard of this. I was going to say I've heard of that. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think she's been touring it quite a while, but it was absolutely hilarious and really quite poignant at the same time, but a real kind of interesting exploration into that kind of stalker phenomenon that we know these days. So what else? I mean, there's a couple of other things. I saw. Do you remember? Do you know who Amateur Transplants are? They're most famous for that. The parody of the song Velvet Underground, London Underground.
No. No.
Okay, it's a great song, but I saw that.
Okay, yes. No, so are they? Well, I suppose they're on YouTube and stuff. So what were they called again?
They're called Amateur Transplants.
Transplants. Right.
Well, I saw Adam Kay. There are two of them in Amateur Transplants who are they're all medical students, so a lot of their songs are kind of medical related. There's a great one. Go onto YouTube and look up the Finals Countdown by Amateur Transplants. I think it's hilarious.
We'll put a link to that in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one more thing that I'll touch on as well. There was a guy, and he's an actor called Pip Utton. And he's famous for his one-man dramas. And I saw him do two shows in one day, very different. One where he did Churchill. So we did an hour monologue about Churchill that was quite funny, quite likeable. But then in the afternoon, I saw him do Adolf. Now, this was the closing night of Adolf. And the way he did this was absolutely brilliant because he didn't try with a German accent, which would have cheapened it. But he was Hitler. And he started talking about some of the things that Hitler did, and he would like slip seamlessly into an echo behind of his voice and all the big hand gestures that we come to know from Hitler's big speeches. Big rallies, and it was great, and he showed some of the contradictions, like he spoke about the same things but from two different parts of Hitler, just to show that basically he was really, really inconsistent and insecure. But then the most amazing thing happened at the end, in that what he did was he ended the show, and then he took off his wig, his jacket and his moustache, And he said, thank fuck that's over. And he asked out into the audience, he says, has anybody got a cigarette? So somebody gave him a cigarette and he opened a can of lager and he just started talking, generally about how smokers in society get berated and how he didn't think that was fair that smokers get a hard rap. And then he started just talking like anecdotally about things and then just slipping little bits of casual racism in. And it got worse and worse and worse and worse until by the end he was telling kind of full on Indian jokes and really quite racist jokes. And then right at the end, he stood up and made a really good point. And he said that, there will be no second coming because I am already amongst you. And he said, people like me exist. And if I come knocking at your door, all you have to do is open it and let me in and I will do the rest. If I knock on your door, will you let me in? And the way he kind of went from showing Hitler and how kind of terrible he was to then trying to suggest that actually a lot of what was behind Hitler still exists and we still all ignore casual racism and these kind of things that are the same thoughts was just it was an amazing performance.
Oh, and what was he called?
The guy was called Pip Utton. The show was called Adolf.
So am I right in thinking that when he takes the wig off and he starts drinking and smoking, people are meant to think the show's over, but obviously it's not. Yeah. Right, okay.
And it was, I think, in the technical term would be the denouement, the kind of, the unknotting that means, the unfolding. And it was just really clever how he made something quite historical, really contemporary. But look, I mean, all in all, the Edinburgh Festival, I had an amazing time. I saw so much stuff and I could literally go on for hours about some of the things I saw. Anybody that was there or anybody that is there, a couple of suggestions that I won't go into detail, but do go and see a show called Repertory Theatre. That's a two-hander. It's a play. It was absolutely brilliant. And then for a bit of a giggle, I saw a show called Wild West End, which was a musical, but it was done taking the piss out of musicals generally, and all the songs were just kind of really like quite light-hearted poke at that kind of Andrew Lloyd Webber and James Cameron and all the people kind of behind the musicals. So yeah, no, great time.
No, I think the Edinburgh Festival and, the Fringe Festival is something I really want to go to. It's like, when I was in Manchester, we used to have one in Manchester. It wasn't anything like, it's not anywhere in the same scale. And I can remember that I actually went along to a theatre. It was like a preview, because I used to own a printing company in Manchester, and we were actually doing quite a lot of printing for some of the shows. And we had to watch a preview video. And I went with my then flatmate Tim, and Tim's a very kind of no-nonsense person, and we had to sit through a preview video of some of the acts that were coming, and one of the acts was some people on a stage shaking some knives and forks, not even very musically, just shaking them. And as we were watching this video, and all these people seemed to be very, very enthralled and interested by this cutlery performance, he just leant over and just goes, "This is my idea of hell." And I was like, yeah, I hear that. I tell
you one thing I did see actually, which I didn't mention, but it was really, really interesting and quite relevant for this, was we saw a show called the Fitznova Radio Hour. And it was a group of kind of 4 or 5 people, and they were recording essentially a radio show. But whilst they were doing it, they were making all of the sound effects of everything they do with things that they got there. So, like there was one where there was somebody on a bike and they were using kind of whisks in the microphones to make the sounds of the bikes, and they got all the opening and shutting doors, and they were kind of like, punching oranges and whacking watermelons, and it was really, really messy with fruit flying. But the way they were kind of making all of the noises to kind of illustrate the show, just like they used to do on radio, was really interesting to watch.
Do you know, I actually watched the program. It was about the making of the program Friends, and there's a couple. They outsourced all of the sound effects to this couple who just do it from their apartment. They have like a recording studio, and it's amazing the actual things that they do. Using the whisker, what they actually do to produce the sound effect. And they said to this couple, "Why don't you actually just do the sound effect itself. And they said, well, the sound effect we make sounds more like the sound than the sound would make. You know?
Yeah.
So
this is a real interesting part of filmmaking, because there's a name for it, and it's called diegetic sound. So diegetic sound is sound that's kind of recorded through the boom and the mic that actually goes on the film, which normally is limited to voice. On TV and film, pretty much every other sound you hear, from footsteps to doors opening to mugs going down, is non-diegetic sound, which means it's added afterwards in a studio. And so all of the sounds that are created, literally beginning to end in film, are created through some kind of weird and wonderful ways of putting them together. And it is really interesting. And if you ever watch a film, you listen to all of the sounds, like even putting cups and saucers down, you can start to see where they don't sound quite natural.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird and kind of strange thing, but obviously they wouldn't get picked up by the normal mics, and the way they produce the sounds I found really interesting. But do you know what I think we should do next year? Because it is annual, isn't it, the Edinburgh Fringe?
Yeah.
I think we should try and record an episode of Interesting Podcast. Once we hit if we get to 1 million subscribers on YouTube and iTunes, we will record, or
million?
Yeah, or I will take 40.
I'll do it for 10,000.
I'll do it for 40 people, right, or just for the laugh. I think we should record an episode live up in Edinburgh.
Yeah, well, I'm already planning my return to the Edinburgh Festival. When I was walking down the Royal Mile, there were a few people we could have spoken to, we could have seen those. And I don't know if you're planning to come up or record London to Edinburgh. But certainly I think that would be an absolute goer, and we can start to pick out some really crazy stuff to go and see.
Just a couple of things to kind of wind up this episode, because once again time is against us. A couple of things that we think we should definitely mention. The first thing is about Lance Armstrong. Now, I don't really understand the case, but Lance Armstrong, who's won the Tour de France, I believe it's 7 times, isn't it? I believe, is it 5 or 7? I know it's
it's a lot.
I know it's a couple more times than me, whatever. But he's been charged with doping. Well, he hasn't been charged with doping. This is the interesting, sort of situation around it. He's stopped contesting the charges made against him. So, and what's happened just this week, he's been stripped of all of his titles. And I was reading about this yesterday in the paper, and they've said basically he's guilty until proven innocent. He's never tested positive for a drug test, and yet he's been charged with doping, or not even charged with doping, but he's had all his titles removed from him, but he's not been found guilty. Now, I don't know the ins and outs, but that's kind of like the basis, and I just think it's a very, very strange thing. If he has been found to be sort of doping, then fair enough, but the fact that he has not been tested positive for any sort of drugs or for doping, and the fact that there's been no kind of trial, the fact that he's just stopping the procedure, but I can understand this has been going on for years, and he's retired, and I think he just wants to spend time with his family and do other things.
Well, I feel a little bit woefully unprepared to discuss this, because like you, the facts that I have around this are quite limited, and it is important that we deal with fact. But what I do understand is that he's not actually admitted guilt, but he's just refused to continue to defend something, and therefore the notion that he would have his title stripped until guilt is likely or even beyond reasonable doubt doesn't seem fair or right. But that said, I think that Lance Armstrong has been kind of put on a pedestal a little bit, and I can't help thinking that there's no smoke without fire. Now, I wasn't aware that he had never tested positive, but I think that it is interesting that he has been continually targeted on drug use and doping whatsoever for so long, and I can't help thinking that there is good reason for that.
I understand that, but the thing is, if somebody wins so much, they are... I think there will be professional jealousy involved, and sometimes to be number one, you can't beat the number one because they're so far ahead, so you have to have other ways of bringing them down. Like I say, I don't know, but I just think that I just don't believe in that sort of judicial system of guilty until proven innocent, and I don't think anything should have been made public at all. And he shouldn't have been stripped of his titles until they can prove beyond reasonable doubt that he has cheated.
And I suppose this week as well, it's both Armstrongs in the news, because we moved from Lance to Neil. Neil Armstrong, the guy that formed part of the film crew that shot the moon landings in a studio in America somewhere and pretended the Americans landed on the moon. Isn't that right, Matt?
That's correct. And he passed away earlier this week. And did you know, not many people know this, but I do, because he told me, he actually, his famous quote, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, he actually said it incorrectly. What he meant to say was, one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. He forgot to say the A. Because if not, one small step for man is pretty much saying the same as mankind, so he was actually meant to say one small step for a man. Could you imagine? He had to say one line. He had time to think about it. He had quite a long journey. And he must have been going through that, going, right, so when I get out, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? Let me ask you, Rick, if you went to the moon, right, and say you were the first person to the moon as well, let's put some more importance on this. What would your first line be?
Oh my God! Well, I'd just be so excited. I'd open up the door and be running around like a screaming kid. Oh my God! I'm on the moon! I'm actually on the moon!
Yeah, see that.
I wouldn't have been anywhere near as dignified as Buzz and Neil and kind of got off and done the plodding thing. I'd be like, woo! I'd have rinsed that up.
Yeah, I think that if I went to the moon, which, to be honest, I'm probably not going to in the next couple of months. I'm pretty busy. I sort of, get off the shuttle and I'd be like, yeah, it's all right. I don't see myself living here, but there's no internet. There's no Costa.
No Costa. How'd you know? There probably is by now.
There's a McDonald's, there's a Starbucks. You can cash your gold. It's got everything up there.
So, Mr. Conspiracy Theorist, did they land on the moon?
I actually saw an interesting program about this where when they went to the moon, they put some mirrors or some reflectors of some kind, and you can actually shoot laser beams up to the moon and have it reflected back. So, whether that proves they went, well, I suppose something must have gone to the moon. Do you know what? It's one of those things that
they landed on the bloody moon.
So I think they probably did. I don't really care.
If you do read some of the conspiracy theory things, like all of the arguments people use about kind of, the flag's windy and there's no wind on the moon.
Yeah.
You can see, you can't see reflections of cameras in the shield and all of this. There is a logical argument behind every single one as to why it is. And do you know what? The Americans are so notoriously bad at keeping state secrets. The country's like a sieve. They would not have been able to sit on that for 50 years without somebody coming forward and saying, yeah, I was the person that held the mic on the day that they built the studio. They did it.
Yeah, probably. Again, I don't really care.
Have you noticed that the one set of people that you would think would want to try and prove that it never happened, their big opponent is in the Russians, who they were having the space war for years and years and years and years. At no point has Russia ever even suggested that it didn't happen.
Well, in that case, let's get Russia on the next episode. And we can talk some...
Later.
No, not the... No, we're not having her back. Okay, so, guys, it's been beautiful once again. Remember, we want you to get involved. We've got... leave us nice comments, leave us likes, subscribe to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/interestingpod.
You can tweet us at InterestingPod.
You can go on our website, which is interestingpodcast.com.
Email us, Rick or Matt, at interestingpodcast.com.
And we're also on Facebook. So that's facebook.com/interestingpodcast.
Before we go, Matt, I would just like to congratulate us. Interesting Podcast now ranks number 1 on Google.
For everything.
No, for interesting and podcasts.
We've ranked number 1 for interesting podcasts. So, no, we were just looking at the stats and stuff before. We're actually getting a lot of hits now and a lot of traffic. So, please share this. Please retweet us. Please share the love, because it's going to get bigger and better in every single episode. So, thank you all for being in contact. Thank you all for your support, and we will see you later.
Thanks for listening to Interesting Podcast with Matt and Rick. Obviously, any views expressed herein are those of the hosts and no one else. If you like what you just heard, please share the website www.interestingpodcast.com with your friends, family and colleagues. You can subscribe, listen to the archive podcasts and get in touch. Do you have something interesting to say? We'd love to hear from you. Get in touch. Tweet us at InterestingPod and like our Interesting Podcast Facebook page. Until next time.